Hey everyone, welcome to SOS conference. If you are able to hear us, see us, please show us with the thumbs up so that we can try to see that we are on the right audio and the video. Thank you. So, it's my pleasure to host the session today. My name is Sindhu. I would like to introduce our esteemed speaker, Lionel Saposnik, a seasoned security researcher over a decade of experience in red teaming, pen testing, and SDLC consulting. As the VP of Security Research at SaiFlow, he specializes in distributed energy management, EV charging infrastructure, focusing on vulnerabilities that could lead to significant disruptions or blackouts. Lionel will be presenting Exploiting EV Charging Networks Pathways to Potential Blackouts. It offers insights on how operators, manufacturers, and regulators can implement strong cybersecurity measures to protect our grid infrastructure. So let's give a warm welcome to Lionel Saponsnik. Yeah, over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for joining my talk. I hope that this talk will be interesting as you expect it to be. I will share my screen and start the presentation. So today we are going to talk on new attack paths to blackouts through the EV charging network. We're going to cover the risk of high power consumers on the grid. We're going to cover different types of load altering attacks, power management of the EV chargers, known vulnerabilities, and how we can use all of those to impact the grid. In the end, we'll have the summary and Q&A session. Before we start, I will introduce myself, but since you already did it, so we can pass through to start and introduce also what we do at SaiFlow. So at SaiFlow, what we do is a platform that provides monitoring and visibility to telemetry of power and the network. And so we can look at all of those together and see if there is an abnormal activity or help you with the security posture. We also, as part of our work, we try to collaborate with the community. We were part of the community that designed the cybersecurity framework for the DC fast chargers. We also disclose vulnerabilities to vendors, to ABB and others. So we also try to, in general, help with the security posture of the EV charging and distributed energy. The threats that we have on the grid and how we manage the energy. So in the operational daily usage, we will reduce the peak hours. The threats on the grid in this talk will be different to what we know from previous on other talks on SCADA systems, on power plants that requires threat actors to have and gain access to the central system or to the transmission stations. There you need to have access to the SCADA, and we're talking about different type of vulnerabilities that the utilization companies already have mechanism to protect against. And we'll take inspiration from a research paper published a few years ago about MED IoT or Black IoT, a botnet of high voltage devices, describing how we can take as an example the Mirai botnet, who got into the number of 600,000 bots. And let's assume this amount of bots were controlling devices that consume high power from the grid, such as air conditioners or heat pumps. They are impacting the grid on the consumer side and not on the utilization central systems. So it's a different perspective. And to make it more relevant to this talk, we're talking about the AC charger and DC chargers as a consumers to the grid that can reach more than AC air conditioner or heat pumps. We're talking about devices that can consume from 22 kilowatts from households or shared workplaces, or even public charging stations with DC fast charging, reaching even to 400 kilowatts. There are multiple ways that operators can load balance the energy that is consumed by the EV chargers. One of the methods is using the management system itself. So it's already configured with what are the limits of the grid and is in charge of load balancing between the consumers and the charging sessions of different vehicles. So it won't cause the breaker on the site to trip. But this is like a more local damage that can be done on the site. And we want to do something even bigger than that. So we have one of the options, managing the energy load balancing through the management system. We already have a lot of research work from different research people, already performed and published exploits. The first one that I think it's pretty neat is that the wall box is one of the EV chargers that was banned in UK because it doesn't meet the security standards and regulations there. The research group successfully retrieved insensitive information of drivers and could also take control over the charger from the Bluetooth interface, just bypassing the authentication. And we see it also in the last publish of those vulnerabilities on Hotel Maxi Charge AC from Computest, who just recently was in the competition of Phone to Own with similar vulnerability through the Bluetooth interface. And in SaiFlow, we did something similar to that, and we found it also on ABB Terra IC. Just to give an example of those similar vulnerabilities that I assume they are pretty much similar, bypassing the authentication. In ABB, for example, a threat actor could have take over the EV charger from a nearby distance from the Bluetooth. The assumption of the vendor is that the PIN code is validated and then the installer can configure it and commission the EV charger for the relevant management system. We found that we can bypass it because the validation was on the mobile device and it had a hard-coded secret and charger ID was used for the authentication between the mobile device and the EV charger itself. So a threat actor from nearby distance, even behind fences, could take control on EV chargers. We take this as an example to what are the impact that we can do in this and on those cases. So we can control the EV charger just to start a session without even identifying ourselves, so we can perform energy theft. For this example, for this talk, we wanted to do stuff that are related to power management. So what we did was we replicated the structure of the control message sent to ABB. In this case, we defined and configured the EV charger to use our own dedicated management system. In this case, we used Steve, which is an open source project for management system for EV chargers. We performed an attack that we can call it an attacker in the middle. And now that the EV charger is controlled by us, we can set the EV charger to reduce the amount that is currently delivered to the EV charger, to the vehicle, and vice versa. We can set it to maximum or to limit and to do different types of manipulation with the power. Having the control on the power can allow us and the threat actors to perform different types of attacks. Load altering attack or naive way to attack the charger is just to stop all the charging sessions. And we can just tell it to deliver zero power current. And we can, if we have enough EV chargers that we to control, we can coordinate a more sophisticated attack that instead of having impact on the grid or the grid on the site limits, we can do it even further to the region or the country if we can try to do more sophisticated attacks. So in this example, we also have reference to other paperwork published not so long ago with regards to dynamic load altering, where it exploits the time that it takes for power plants to adjust to what is currently the all end user are consuming from the grid. So if there is a high demand, you need to produce more power, but because we have control on all of those EV chargers, we can react faster than the power plant. And if we do it in a coordinated way, we can create an exponential effect that will go beyond the conditions that make the grid balanced and cause a blackout in not only the site, but maybe even further than that. I think the exploits that I showed you now are really nice, and we can do it in a few seconds just by passing by different EV chargers in public charging station or private fleets. But the scale is a problem. So we need a lot of EV chargers. We need to do a lot of physical work passing by a lot of EV chargers. That's just to have enough EV chargers to make an impact on the grid. So our conclusion was that we need to find a better way to improve the scale of the exploit so we can try to perform in a wider way. Before we get to the new attack paths that I want to describe in this talk, we try to map here in SaiFlow where simplified the attack surface that the EV charging sites have. So we see all the devices such as the EV chargers, the network devices. We can see sometimes we have smart meter, energy storage, management system, and so on and so on. The examples that we saw until now were the nearby interfaces, almost physical, such as the Bluetooth, to perform load altering and exploit management interfaces. But in order to have better scale, we think that we need to go in a step up to a more broader controller of EV chargers. So we think about management systems. So we can perform stop commands or dynamic load altering remotely. But in order to understand how we do the remote commands of limiting the charging power delivered to the vehicle, we need to have a bit understanding how OCPP protocol works. In general, it's a standard that most of the industry use already. Could be 1.6, but I know that already vendors are adjusting to 2.0.1 and further. It's a simple structure containing if it's a request, response, or error, message ID correlating between the request and response, and the action. And for the action, we have the payload with the relevant parameters. And on the right side, you can see an example of status notification indicated by the EV charger for the management system that the port is available for charging. In other cases, and I won't cover all the options that OCPP provide, but just a few of them to understand how we can exploit it from the management system. So I'm as a driver, I want to start a charging session to my vehicle. I will authorize myself to the EV charger from a mobile application or using RFID or other methods. That request will be sent to the management system. It will respond back if it's accepted or not. And then if it's accepted, the EV charger will tell the management system, look, I'm going to start a transaction on connector ID 1. If there are multiple ports, it will be 2, 3, and so on. And the management system will respond back with the relevant information such as the transaction ID and if it's accepted. Until the driver, me, I want to stop the charging session. So I will send the stop transaction and the management system will accept it. So it will also include how much energy was delivered to the vehicle. So later they can bill me with the correct amount of energy that I was consuming. Between those start transaction and stop transaction, there are multiple types of messages that can go back and forward. such as set charging profile. And what this type of OCPP message do is it's initiated by the management system, and it tells the EV charger, look, on connector 1, I want you to limit the power that is delivered to the vehicle. We have the unit, it could be kilowatts or watts, and the number to limit the power that is delivered to the vehicle. And the EV charger will tell the management system if it's accepted or not. And the last one, and it's relevant more for the later subject that we'll have in this talk, is the data transfer message, which is used for vendors that wants to extend the capabilities that the OCPP standard doesn't provide. For example, if the vendor wants to provide operations for setting advertisement on the screen of the EV charger, so each vendor will have its own implementation. What they can do is reuse the same communication between the management system and the EV charger, and have the vendor ID for the EV charger to understand what type of message it's going to be, and the data is just a blob data according to the decision of the proprietary implementation. It could be a string of JSON, could be binary, and so on. So those are the examples of OCPP relevant to this talk. During our research, as I told you, we wanted to have better scale on how we can exploit as much EV charger as we can do. We found interesting insights on how some vendors maintain a hidden management communication. So even though the operator is managing its own EV charger by its third-party management system, vendors of EV chargers might maintain a back-channel communication to their own backend system. We saw multiple types. The first one, and we call it, and I saw also in the industry that other people call it this, something similar to that, is the shadow OCPP. And we saw it mainly on DC fast chargers that they maintain two parallel communication, one for the operator's management system, CSMS, and in addition, they have the OCPP for the vendor's backend, probably for providing over-the-air firmware update, or have the abilities to collect diagnostics and provide support for the operator. But either way, the vendor maintains a powerful communication to the EV charger, even though it's configured to a third-party management system. The second one, and we already see indications of it in Kaspersky research, and also in the last Blackouts compute test revealed how they compromise the backend services of ChargePoint. And if you are interested on the details, you have the QR codes referencing to the information. But in general, I will talk on how those vendors maintain some kind of back communication to the backend server. We saw two types. One of them is the remote shell, kind of a reverse SSH tunnel. So the backend system or the backend services of the vendor can have access to the shell of the EV charger itself, and can execute commands and so on. Or we saw also that the EV charger itself, although it's managed by a third-party management system, continuously send logs similar to syslogs or other type of logs through sometimes unsecure HTTP communication to the backend. I assume that this is also for diagnostic and remote support, but either way, sometimes it contains the OCPP messages themselves containing sensitive information between the third-party management system and the EV charger. And the last one, and I won't go into too much details here, but it's also an interesting insights on how vendors which created EV chargers that doesn't use the OCPP standard. So in order to have the ability for those vendors to connect the EV chargers to a third-party management system that uses OCPP, the backend system is used as an interface between the MQTT messages and the OCPP standard for the management system. The interesting thing here is that in this case, we see that the vendor is always maintaining control or have the ability to control the EV charger of they created by their own. So even though it's by the owner or the operator, the vendor still maintains kind of management interface to the EV chargers. So we looked on ways that we can have a scale to exploit a lot of EV chargers from remote. This attack, one of the attacks that we found, I call it CSMS as a proxy, and I will tell you why. What we saw is one of the approaches that I covered just right now is the shadow OCPP, and we saw it mainly on DC fast chargers and sometimes on AC also, but they used data transfer messages to have control to different types of proprietary operations, and sometimes they overlap with a start transaction or stop in certain conditions. But we found that this vendor provide also a mobile application to drivers who wants to use the chargers that are by this vendor, and the owner has set it to be public, so everyone can use it and also pay for it if the owner set it to be like that. We saw that the mobile user can communicate directly to the EV charger by a proxy, and it looks like this. So the mobile application creates the payload. It's a JSON payload and not related to the OCPP. It communicates with the backend system, send the payload and set the serial number of the EV charger. The backend system will encapsulate it into a data transfer OCPP message, and then it will go to the management system of the vendor and send it to the EV charger itself through the data transfer. The EV charger will receive that, will process it and return a response back, accepted to the management system, and then the backend system will unwrap it, unpack it, and send it back to the mobile user. So you see why I call it kind of a proxy, because in the end, what the user sends are not like the authorization mechanisms, and allows any user to send any message they want to the EV charger. And this is one of the things that we found. So everyone can connect to that interface, because also everyone can create a new user, connect to that interface, and send the custom payload that you can see here in Burp, the tool that we used as part of our research. In this case, we tell the EV charger to stop in certain conditions. So in 20%, please stop the charging. We set the serial number here, and then we can see that the message here, we see it in SaiFlow investigation platform. We can see the message, and we can see all the parameters sent to the EV charger from the management system. And not only that, we can send other types of messages after reverse engineering the mobile application. We can see a start transaction, and we can see the power limitation that we want to do in order to perform load altering attack. So this is one of the interesting exploits that we found in the wild. And not only that, we found that they also doesn't have a good input validation. So you can add additional JSON properties to the message that is sent to the EV charger in the end, which probably exposes the EV charger to broader type of attacks, such as buffer overflow or parsing issues, and so on and so on. What we did with this new finding is we can perform denial of charge or perform a denial of service. if it's private fleets, such as police stations that use electric vehicles, or a delivery company, you can cause damage to the operational daily usage. But if you want to have impact on the grid, we can use one of the load altering type of attacks in order to set different types of limitations, such as what you can see here. So we sent, for example, max current set to 7 here in the message, and we can see that we have manipulated the charging session to be different each period of time. So we can perform interesting stuff and sophisticated load altering attacks on the grid. Just to refer back to the MedIoT research paper, which talks about devices that consume maybe up to 5 kilowatts, we understand that in this case we need much less consumers or much less devices to be part of the botnet, because the EV charger are using 350 or 400 kilowatts, which are much more than what is referred to in the research paper. To take all this information and close it up, what we saw is how threat actors can exploit the weak security posture of EV charging infrastructure. And another interesting insight here is that it's not the first time, and we saw it here in our research team on different occasions also, that the service that is exposed to the wild, to the internet, which have more potential to be exploited, is coupled with the management system of the EV charger, which is a critical operational service. So if a threat actor exploits the services that are accessible from the internet, have greater impact on systems that have access to the critical infrastructure and the grid. I don't want to leave you all with this information and be scared. I want to have the information to have the ability to solve it or to protect against something like that. So like any other cases, you need to understand what is the risk. You need to perform vulnerability management. You want to monitor the activity that is performed in the network, and especially in the management communication of the EV chargers and other distributed energy resources, and find if there is a potential abnormal activity, not only for security incidents. So we know that EV charger suffer today from even daily operational issues. Having the monitoring capabilities and collecting all the information and the logs to be able to find the root cause analysis will help also in the operational daily usage, and especially for security incidents that could affect your EV charging infrastructure. That's all. Thank you very much for joining the talk. Feel free to follow us on our LinkedIn page and the blogs. And I'm here to hear your questions and try to answer the best as I can.
Yeah. Thank you, Lionel, for your interesting talks. We have a couple of questions in the Q&A. So, yeah, I can try to put them on the stage if you would like to take the questions now.
Yeah, sure. So
Yeah, I think the first questions we have is yeah. So the EV chargers market has many new players now, so sometimes without long industrial knowledge. So do you see many EV chargers that are based on consumer IoT hardwares like Raspberry Pi, and how to secure in general the devices are?
I didn't see it personally. I saw other people, researchers, that published papers on subjects like that. I think Kaspersky did it maybe 5 years ago. We see that the industry is leveling up and not using Raspberry Pi anymore, but there are some indication that they are still close and they have more work to do in order to improve and get into something we expect to see in the industry in the level of security and hardware. And how to secure general devices such as those. I think monitoring is the best capability and tools, but not also. You need to, a lot of the things you don't need to invent from beginning. So taking best practices as segmentation. So if you have an EV charger that exposes SSH service or web service that have vulnerabilities, you want to have and not just a simple network device such as switch. You want to have maybe a firewall that will prevent from one EV charger to communicate with the other if it's not necessary.
Yeah, thank you. I think, yeah, it got answered. So, in case of more questions, then yeah, please try to write the follow-up questions to us. So, yeah. So, next, moving on to the next question. So, I'll try to put it on the stage. Can this kind of exploit cause any damage to the device? The blackouts.
This kind of exploit, it might cause damage to the device. On most cases, there should be hardware security components that will prevent it. But I think that, as we can see sometimes on internet, that people published batteries that explode, or that someone connected its vehicle to the EV charger and then something breaks, even the vehicle itself. So I assume, yes, it might. I don't know if this exploit specifically, but I think we will see more than that.
Yep. Thank you. And the next one is it possible to have a kill switch for EVs charging stations that can be used to stop it from the supply chain attacks, or it is not an option here to respond?
I think it depends on where is the impact. If it's from the local network, we are talking about different mechanisms that we want to implement as a kill switch to stop it. If it's from remote to, and similar to what I described in this talk, you can have mechanisms that have the monitoring and even prevention capabilities on the messages that are passing back and forth from the management system to the EV charger. And you can stop certain commands from being sent to the EV charger on those cases. But it really depends on what are the attack vectors. And this is one of the reasons that we do a lot of research in SaiFlow to understand all the attack surface, what are the potential risks, and how we can provide solutions to protect against the different attackers.
Yeah. Okay. So then, yeah, the next question. Did I get it right that the same backend services that handle important operation on chargers are used by mobile app users as well?
This is my assumption. It's not a fact. But I think that what I've described in this talk pretty much explain why I assume this. Because even if it's two different microservices, but it's in the same backend, you understand that there isn't a mechanism that do a strong separation between what is served to the internet and the users and the critical infrastructure. And there is more work to do to separate between those two. So even though I don't know if it's the same service itself, the idea of it being coupled without the mechanisms separating, it's what concerns here.
Yeah, thank you. I think it got answered to Dennis. So moving on to the next one. Yeah. Is there any place where we can learn about pen testing, OCPP, and EV charging networks? Maybe go to place for your work if it's publicly hosted on SaiFlow website or GitHub.
Yes, yes. You you can go and find a lot of information in our website, such as the ABB and this exploit that we have described with even more information. I had to reduce a lot of it in order to meet the time conditions of 30 minutes. So feel free to read about it. And also the references in the presentation to different research groups in different companies. I think they do an interesting job on finding a new paths and new ways to attack EV chargers and the potential risk of this section and vertical in the industry.
Yeah, that would be interesting and it would bring in more and more awareness for many of us and from the attendees also if we have such more informations available on this. So, moving on to the next question, which was collected, then what role does vehicle to grid technology play in stabilizing the grid amidst increasing EV adoption and how this can be leveraged to prevent potential blackouts caused by charging damage surges?
I think it's an interesting area where I really want to do my next research, and I will. Um, but ideally, it's the same approach. So the EV charger have the communication with the vehicle, and they communicate in order to make the demands maybe from the grid and make sure if it needs to deliver power to reduce the and do peak shaving. I think a lot of the um, ideas around vehicle to grid, um, we don't see it enough in the real world or implemented. So it's hard for me to have a good answer to that. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, no issues. And then we also had some initial thoughts or views about do we have a connection to the EV charging? And I think it's pretty much covered now in your sections. You can also try to throw a little more light on that context. And so some of them still feel it is completely uncharted territory. So maybe any lost thoughts in this direction? I think you're trying to speak. I'm not able to hear.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was maybe I had a internet problem.
Mhm. So any
Where
last thoughts on yeah, the working connection to EV charging, and some of them still feel that it is completely uncharted territory. So
um, so as you saw on the attack surface that is simplified in this presentation, we continue to discover new ways to gain access to EV chargers and with new interfaces. So part of the things are not part of the standard, such as the Bluetooth interface for commissioning. Different vendors implement it differently. And other vendors might maintain backend communication, back channel communication. So you can see the differences. This is the territory that we continuously discover. And what we aim to do is to provide the tools to reduce the risk, to provide more awareness. Um, if you have, I'll take back the example of the firewall on the site. You can prevent this back communication to the vendor, or at least be aware or open it to a dedicated time window that you want to have support and provide access to the vendor. So having the better control in these areas and visibility will be a good start.
thank you, Lionel, for the wonderful insights and giving us more lights on the potential threats of EV charging and how it can affect many vulnerabilities which can fall under this category. So, in case for audience, if you have more questions and you want to directly talk to the speaker, he may be available at the launch for some time. So you can join on the stage one for some more minutes after the session, so that you can also discuss with the speaker in case of more questions. So thank you once again, Lionel, for the wonderful speech and as well as the
Thank you.
insights. And thank you all for joining.
Thank you. Thank you very much.